Here is the lecture on Lewis and Clark, the core discovery, the return trip back to St. Louis. Had some technical difficulties today, so the lecture will be a little different with no students here, but here we go. We mentioned yesterday about Meriwether Lewis and William Clark split up once they crossed the Lolo Trail. Lewis going north to explore the Meriwether River and then down the Missouri to the mouth of the Yellowstone, whereas Clark would go south from the Lolo Trail and hit the Yellowstone River, and they would meet at the mouth of the Yellowstone near present-day North Dakota. We had mentioned that Lewis did travel north, followed the Meriwether, explored the Meriwether. He and his men encountered some hostile Blackfoot Indians. The Blackfoot Indians made an attempt to steal both weapons and horses from Lewis and his men. They had an ensuing fight. 2 Indians were killed, and so Lewis decided to skedaddle, and his men traveled over 100 miles in just 24 hours, and they will be at the mouth of the Yellowstone much sooner than William Clark. Clark, his men, along with Sacagawea, Toussaint Charbonneau, and their infant son, traveled down the Yellowstone River Valley to explore that new area. As the expedition continued down the Yellowstone, they passed what Captain Clark referred to in his journals as a, quote, most remarkable rock. This remarkable rock rose some 200 feet above the ground and was located on the banks of the Yellowstone River near present-day Pompey's Pillar, Montana. On July 25th of 1806, Clark decided to climb toward the top of this rock, and he carved his name and the date on the rock, which is still visible under bulletproof glass today. He then ascended to the top of the rock and put in his journals how he could see in all directions from the top of that rock. He could see immense herds of buffalo, elk, and packs of wolves. He decided then to descend and proceed on his journey. Clark named this remarkable rock Pompey's Tower, which is on your ID sheet, and that was in honor of Sacagawea's baby boy, Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau. The reason he called it Pompey's Tower is Captain Clark had fondly referred to the boy as Pomp, which was a Shoshone word meaning firstborn. There also is a small creek that runs next to that remarkable rock, coming off the Yellowstone River, and Clark named that creek Baptiste's Creek in honor of the baby's Christian name. The remarkable rock was changed to Pompey's Pillar, and the creek was called Pompey's Creek early in 1900, and an E was added to the names as well. Not really very well explained, but it is a change presently from what Clark had named it back in 1806. Clark continued his return, and both parties reached the mouth of the Yellowstone and the Missouri River. And at this point, Clark discovered that Lewis was recovering from a gunshot wound, kind of an unusual wound. During their journey back along the Missouri River, Meriwether Lewis and One-Eyed Pete Cruzat, who's on your ID sheet, went into the brush to hunt. Both men were dressed in elk skins, and Cruzat, who apparently mistook Lewis for an elk, shot him, embarrassingly enough, in the buttocks. Cruzat only had one good eye, and according to journals, although the wound was painful, no vital organs were damaged. After Lewis's recovery from the wound, the Corps Discovery continued down the Missouri River towards St. Louis, and they stopped again at the Mandan villages where Toussaint Charbonneau, Sacagawea, and Pomp parted from the Corps Discovery, and Toussaint Charbonneau was paid approximately $450 for his services. On September 23rd of 1806, the Lewis and Clark expedition reached St. Louis after 28 months of travel. The expedition traveled over 8,000 total miles over a period of 2 years, 4 months, and 10 days. Some of the benefits of the Lewis and Clark expedition: the biggest benefit of the Lewis and Clark expedition was the discovery of the Northwest Passage, or the waterway from the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. But the Corps Discovery brought back many other important items from the journey. They brought back maps that they had drawn during the journey, journals of their experiences on the journey, samples of plants. Lewis actually charted over 178 different plants on the expedition. They brought back samples of insects, bones of various animals, furs of various animals. And again, Lewis had charted over 122 different species of animals during their expedition. They brought back soil samples and samples of rocks. After the expedition, Clark freed his Negro slave York. However, York's freedom was not officially recognized until 10 years later. To this day, historians are astonished that only one life was lost during this very dangerous mission to locate the Northwest Passage. In addition, the idea that an infant, Sacagawea's baby, could withstand the potential risks of this dangerous journey is equally amazing. According to eyewitness accounts by those men who served under both Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, the two men never argued one time during the expedition, nor did they ever disagree over an important decision during the entire course of the 28-month expedition. And in the end, Lewis and Clark had given President Thomas Jefferson the important information the United States needed about that vast territory known as the Louisiana Purchase. We're going to talk a little bit about Lewis and Clark after the Corps of Discovery. What did they do? What did their lives turn to? One was going to be positive, one was going to be kind of sad. We'll start with Meriwether Lewis. He was rewarded by President Jefferson in three ways. He was given 1,600 acres of his own. He was given a monetary bonus of $1,228. And he was appointed governor of the Louisiana Territory, which might be more of a detriment than a positive because of the vast amount of land that the Louisiana Territory had. Well, unfortunately, Meriwether Lewis proved to be a very ineffective governor. He drank heavily and fell into deep depression. And on October 11, 1809, he was on his way to Washington, D.C. when he died suddenly at a shabby cabin in Tennessee. Now, reports of his death are mixed. Most people thought suicide, but others claim he might have been murdered because he suffered 2 separate gunshot wounds. However, murder or suicide are not clear today. William Clark, on the other hand, had a much more successful life. After his return from the expedition, he was promoted to the rank of Brigadier General by President Jefferson. In 1813, after President James Madison assumed the presidency, he appointed William Clark governor of the Missouri Territory. It was during his time as governor of the Missouri Territory that he arranged for the publications of his journals that he wrote on the expedition into books that could be read by others across this country. After the Corps of Discovery, William Clark also married, eventually having 10 children, naming his firstborn son Meriwether Lewis Clark. Sacagawea had an untimely death in 1812. Still to this day, no one's sure about her death or where she's buried. But anyway, after her death, William Clark adopted her 2 children, obviously Pompey, who was 10 at the time, and his little sister Lisette Charbonneau, who had just been born. And according to accounts, Lisette was born in August of 1812, and she died at the age of 1 year old sometime in 1813. Again, the facts are a little muddy. Well, Pompey eventually became a skilled interpreter and a scout in the Western Mountains, and he died in Oregon at the age of 61. As far as William Clark, he died on September 1st, 1838, at the age of 77, a genuine American hero. Tomorrow we'll be watching some various videos, Facts versus Fiction, the Lewis and Clark Expedition, another short on the Lewis and Clark Expedition, and then watching a video on National Geographic entitled The Lewis and Clark, The Great Journey West, which will be about 40 minutes. So there'll be no note-taking tomorrow in class. We'll be watching videos on the Lewis and Clark Expedition. That was the lecture today. I hope you enjoyed it in its short form, and we'll see you tomorrow.